he kept on saying a rising tide lifts all boats. It's not a competition. And I've tried to really, and he was right. I really think he was right about that. And so I think, in the sort of new world that we live in, the sort of old world of journalist scoops and exclusives and all the rest of it don't really work anymore. You don't want an exclusive. You want everybody to have the story.
Back to the TED Talk. You put up a photo in it. You reminded me of that scene in Network, the movie, because I think you trembled a bit, and your voice
I was very nervous.
A bit. You looked it, but very nervously. You looked into the eyes and addressed personally, the great forces of nature of the world today. You spoke to Mark Zuckerberg and eye to the camera, and you stood for democracy. And there was a moment where you put up a picture and you referred to people there posing for a picture. And there was one Aaron Banks in that picture. And you just, used a few words in reference there, which, well, he didn't like. And you got into some serious trouble for that, didn't you?
So you have to say who Aaron Banks is first.
You have to say who Aaron Banks is first.
So, yeah. So Aaron Banks is a figure who's probably familiar to you. Aaron Banks is a wealthy businessman, or is he? Where does his money actually come from? Was a question which was being asked by a lot of journalists at the time. But he was a businessman who had essentially paid for the Brexit referendum. So he was the biggest donor. He donated £8 million. And he had been in my story right from the beginning because it was his campaign, Leave EU, which had hired Cambridge Analytica. So right from the start, Aaron Banks and Cambridge Analytica was part of this story I was on. And I had, the journalism, we kept on finding things out, and there were investigations open. So as a result of the first story I wrote, the Electoral Commission opened an investigation into whether they'd correctly declared their spending. The Information Commissioner's Office opened an investigation into whether they had illegally used data. And then the NCA opened an investigation into because it came from offshore, this money, who or what was the true source of this donation. So lots of investigations. But then the story I did, which was the one which hit a nerve, was that in the summer of 2018, I was passed this stash of emails that were between Aaron Banks and his business associate and the Russian ambassador in London. And it turned out that in the sort of month, the same week that they launched their Brexit campaign, he went and visited the Russian ambassador twice in his residence. And at the second meeting, which was the day before the press launch of the Brexit campaign, he was introduced to a Russian businessman there who offered him these two business deals. One to invest in a load of gold mines, and one to invest in the privatization of a state diamond firm. And we could see that they were negotiating those deals and apparently going to Moscow in the months before the Brexit vote. And so this is the story, which he'd already was very angry with me. He was already, even though, as I say, I was one journalist, but there was a lot of journalism going on into him. And he got very angry when we published that story. He tried reporting me to the police. He accused me of computer theft. He accused me of hacking into his computer. He accused me of blackmailing somebody. So it got very nasty. And then he took the opportunity of the TED Talk, essentially. He didn't go after me at that point. He didn't sue The Guardian. He waited until after the TED Talk, and then...
Because there you were on your own.
I was on my own. I was outside my news organization. TED is an American publisher protected by the First Amendment. And so that's when he came after me. And it was this thing of picking me off as an individual. Because, Manuel, he thought I was the weakest link. And it turned out that he made a miscalculation on that one. But thank you. Yeah.
He thought you were the weakest link.
He thought I was the weakest
and he
link.
wanted to make you feel that way.
Well,
Because what did he do?
You can't defend. So I mean, there is so much to talk about Daphne in this, but it's libel.
Oh, we are, aren't we?
We are. Libel in the UK High Court is so expensive. It is so expensive. There is no way an individual can defend themselves. You know, an average libel trial is probably £2 million, and it can be a lot more. And he knew everything about me, and he knew that I didn't have the money to defend myself. And so this going after me, he wanted me to retract these words about this relationship with the Russian government in order to that then he could say, not a penny of Russian money went into Brexit. And this seemed to be very important to him to have me do this. And, but I crowdfunded.
Hold on, because there's a decision before that. You decided not to retract, because retracting this and saying,
it was true.
No.
I mean, not the fact.
A lot of fear. If you had just said, to hell with it. Okay, sorry.
It was, yeah, I mean, it's really difficult to explain, is just that it was something so profound in that he was trying to force me to say something which I knew was not true. He was trying to force me to say, and I'd never be able to say those words again. And he was just trying to bully me. It was pure intimidation.
Okay, so he bullied you because he opened a lawsuit. It's something that you cannot pay for even to defend. You're on your own, you're isolated, you don't even have the newsroom backing you because you're not publishing on The Guardian when you're saying this. But you're also guilty of something very serious. You are an investigative journalist while female.
And for that, you can never be forgiven.
Absolutely. So there's a public reaction to this, and it's not all sympathetic. It's not all saying, she must be saying the truth. Some people are not being nice about it.
Well, the thing is that because, as well as the lawsuit is just one aspect of it. It's that actually the lawsuit helps to fuel. There'd always been these very smearing articles about me in the right-wing press and this sort of social media abuse. But the lawsuit helped to fuel that. It sort of supersized it. And it was like conspiracy Carole is out of her depth. You know, crazy cat lady is like gone too far this time. And the thing is that the people, they don't know what to, ordinary people will think, well, they're not quite sure. Did she do something wrong? Did she get her facts wrong? Oh, well, maybe it's a... And, that thing of confusing people, muddying the waters. And also the other thing that happened to me is that, I was doing my job as a journalist and I'd investigated something which was deeply political because it was this, once-in-a-lifetime election which changed our constitution. But because it was such a polarizing political issue, I was made into a political figure. So, and that was the thing which was, I became this sort of hate figure, essentially, for the right wing. And I was a really easy target. It was that was a sort of sport, really, having a go at me in that way. And, and this is why it's lawfare in that the litigation is only one part of it. It's harassment. It is a campaign of harassment and intimidation. And it is absolutely designed to crush you and to silence you and to stop the journalism. And it works. It works. That since Arron Banks launched that lawsuit against me, not a single, there was tons of journalism and articles and investigation up to that point, and then it stopped. And I just want to make clear, just to go back to the thing from before, because I have never said that Arron Banks took money from Russia, because all we know is that he was negotiating those deals. There is no evidence we have that that he accepted money. So I just want to be really clear on that, just in case.
Absolutely. Okay, so you're on your own. You're not with the news organization. You're on your own. You're being ridiculed, targeted, mocked, and sued. Who's on your side?
Well, the public. So the whole thing is I had no institutional or organisational support. I had no way of paying for lawyers. I had just even like dealing with the legal letters and things, it was like really overwhelming. But what I did do is I set up a crowdfunder, so 2 crowdfunders in the end. And it was, like the whole thing, and it makes me always very sort of emotional because I had 30,000 people contribute to my crowdfunders. It was over £800,000. I mean, it was a huge amount. And it's, the reason for that is, it's not for me, it's because people can see what was going on. They could see what was going on and, they didn't like it because it's fundamentally unfair and undemocratic. And, what actually happened in this election, we still don't know.
There was a time when we were all congratulating you because you walked out of court with a favorable decision. And we can't say we were as happy as you were, but we were all relieved. But after that, when you drew breath,
it's been very, very numbing. I think because I was in such total fear for so long, it was like chronic stress in that if I had lost, I knew exactly what would happen, which is that I would have been smeared across every right-wing website from here to Kingdom Come. And it would have been it would have crushed me as a journalist. It would have crushed my entire body of work. My reputation would be in tatters. I would not be able to do the same work again. And it would be, accompanied by this torment of, social media abuse. And I think, this thing of living, and I had a sort of rehearsal of this. I had an earlier hearing in 2020, a meaning hearing, and at which it was sort of, it got misreported what had happened. But anyway, and I had that sort of experience then, and it was really overwhelming, and there was sort of nothing I could do about it. And so I really lived with this sort of sense of helplessness and total hopelessness over a really extended period of time. And even so, it kind of, when I won, it was a relief. But it wasn't joyous. It has been quite numbing. And to be honest with you, I've been doing very little in public because I've just that thing of being a kind of public punch bag and everything I'm doing being sort of, I think it's just this thing about being under attack for so long. So it's like, it felt like a very special thing to actually do this here in Malta, where I sort of feel that sort of people have got an understanding actually of this in a way in which I think a lot of places don't.
I can tell you these people are safe. I can vouch for them. You're safe here. I can't make promises for outside, but you're safe here. Are you a free journalist? Are you free?
Intriguing question, Manuel. I mean, you're not free to write what you know. I'm not free to write what I know in Britain. I mean, that is impossible for me to write what I know because, I will get sued and no publication will publish, actually, some of this stuff. There is a really, really, really high bar to publishing journalism about corruption, and it endlessly gets watered down. And, and that's understandably from the publications because they can't afford to defend this stuff. So, no, in that sense, I don't think it's free. And I certainly didn't feel like there was a free... I mean, I was, I think for during this time, whilst I was waiting for my judgment, I felt very acutely that we do not have a free press in Britain. And, this was not how a free press operates, like having this happen.
I want to know if there are questions from the floor. It's not, we are the floor, really. Natalie, yeah. So I thought I saw it.
To ask you, because
Can we get Natalie a microphone, please? Because of the Facebook. Speaking of Facebook, yeah, we're on it.
I would like to ask you a question about the impact of this hidden advertising. And the reason I'm asking it is because I have a 22-year-old daughter who's a bit engaged in the media, and with whom I used to have these heated discussions about whether Trump would be elected and whether Brexit would make it or not. And she was right on both counts. So probably she was seeing social media, which I wasn't seeing. And what you're saying intrigued me because I'm not sure about how it works. Can you tell us a bit more about it, how it worked? How the advertising really targeted and worked on these people? Because whenever I see websites that I want to see and ads come up, now you're not going to like this, Manuel, I don't click on the ads. So I mean, I think the ads don't affect me, but maybe I'm wrong, maybe they affect me too. So can you tell us a bit more about it?
There's all sorts of different ways there's all sorts of different techniques and ways. But I think the thing we know about, for example, in the Trump election was that it didn't look like ads. It just looked like news stories, and that's we know that there was a story which on Facebook that the Pope had endorsed Trump. And, I think that was seen, I can't remember, it was seen by an astonishing millions and millions of people saw that news story. Of course, it's not a news story. And they wouldn't have known that it wasn't a news story, and they wouldn't have known it was an ad. It's just boosted into their feed. And that, I think, is the thing that is the sort of scary aspect of this, that you don't even, I think it's really interesting. I remember talking to a sort of Danish military expert at one point for one of the stories, and I sort of said to him, what do you say to people who said, well, they're not they don't feel that they're being targeted, and that this doesn't really affect them, and and he was just like, well, good luck with that, because this is happening all of the time in all sorts of ways, and most it's often invisible. You won't even realise. It's very sophisticated. And on the other platforms, that's also true. And the new platforms like TikTok, I don't know if any of you have got teenagers, or if you've been. So TikTok, it's just it's endless scrolling through these like really funny, very creative videos. It's hugely addictive. And somebody's nodding. Yes, it's like crack cocaine once you're on there. But the amount of, and that's a Chinese-owned platform. It's got a whole other host of problems with it. But you can't research. There's masses and masses of misinformation going on there in all sorts of ways. But it's really opaque. And for academics and researchers, there's almost no way to research it and to even figure out what's going on. So there's sort of, the things that I'm talking about, 2016, that's already really old-fashioned. There's kind of new techniques and new platforms and more sophisticated ways, and in that way, technology is always going to be one step ahead.
George?
Thank you very much. Fascinating. I mean,
well, the bizarre thing is that I never felt like giving up, and I felt that I couldn't give up, and I think it was just that thing. Is like I said, I went down the rabbit hole and I started uncovering all of this information, and there was just a really, really strong public interest in needing to have this information come out, But all along the way, as I said, I wasn't an investigative journalist. That wasn't my background, and I kept on, I kept on like waiting for this sort of crack team of investigative journalists to come along and go, it's okay, we got this, and they never arrived, and so it just essentially was me at my kitchen table for a lot of the time, with a few, you know, kind of wonderful colleagues and editors who I was really lucky to work with. But so I've never felt like I could give up, and it was like the same thing with the legal case. It just never felt like an option to me to concede to what, you know, I knew to be a lie. But yeah, and I haven't really, I think the thing I'm trying to do at the moment is I haven't really processed it. I think that's the thing I'm trying to do, because it's, you know, it's quite a big thing having somebody spend £2 million to try and destroy you, and like wondering about, you know, what lies behind that, and why. You know, these are quite big questions. And yeah, so I hope that I'm going to bounce back stronger, but I'm still in my sort of like, what on earth was that sort of stage. I think it's shock, to be honest.
Louisa? I saw you,
Um,
Julian, and I saw Pia as well.
So thank you for this. It's amazing. To be coming from somewhere, and okay, they're going to hide it, but it's in their interest to win, and this is why they're doing this. So is there one way of following the money trail?
So basically, in 2016, there was nothing. There was no ad library, there was no archive, nothing. And then after we broke the Cambridge Analytica story in 2018, Facebook announced, okay, we'll have an ad library. And they have it they make this distinction. They now keep political ads. But only in certain countries, not in all of the world at all. And you can search that and sort of you get some sense of what's going on. But there's and that has to give an entity's name that's paying for the ads. But there's just so many problems, because A, what's a political ad? Like, if it doesn't look like a political ad, if it just looks like an article about the environment or something, that doesn't go into the ad library. The entities, we don't actually know who's behind those entities or where that money's come from. So there's still kind of this total opacity that is so easy to exploit. I mean, if I was a hostile government, if I was a hostile nation, or even just a motivated individual, and I had a few £1 million to target your election, I could have a really good go at it.
Julian?
I think there's one of the biggest problems that you can sort of point out from this discussion is that, first of all, platforms like Facebook ultimately benefit from all the money they get from getting boosted advertising or boosted content in general. So a company like Facebook is seeking to be profitable at the end of the day. On the other hand, you also have government hostile actors like you were just describing now, who, first of all, can get away with this opacity and also ultimately benefit from it. So the situation as it is benefits both policymakers and people who are in power, as well as the companies that are ultimately pushing all of this in our face.
Exactly.
So what needs to happen in order for this to change? Because obviously I don't see any political will to change it. I don't see Zuckerberg anytime soon going like, you know what, I'll start making less money. So what needs to happen, maybe perhaps from the public's end, from journalists, from people who care about this? Like, what needs to be done to break this deadlock?
I mean, it's like you've hit the nail on the head. It's why it's sort of, there is the politicians and the tech platforms are sort of like in this warm embrace, essentially, because they need each other. They need each other, and that's, protects them both. So it's a massive problem, and there is, Europe is passing legislation more quickly than the United States. So there are some things which have been happening, but it takes a really long time. I personally pin my kind of hopes on, there's some really interesting legal cases being brought against Facebook in the United States, and that actually go to, could potentially have criminal ramifications. So that's what I'm still sort of pinning my hopes on. But, it's the question of, I think in this race of does legislation come before sort of democracy is tanked around the world, that is a race, I think. And, at the moment, the tanking democracy, one side of things is winning.
And as democracy is losing, they are the ones making the laws. So they'd rather find a way of making this system work for them. Pia, are there any more questions, or is Pia and Paul, and we'll start picking up? Yeah.
Julie's question was actually my question, but I'd like to add it with another what needs to happen question. You broke my heart on many levels, but also when you said that there is truth that you can't publish, that you can't speak about because nobody will carry it and you will be sued to high heaven. This is obviously wrong, and I'm sure that it's not an isolated case. So there's a lot of truth that we who need to know the truth are not hearing. And I don't know whether, there will be changes in our lifetime. However, if we don't start talking about them, about these changes that need to be made, then they never will happen. What can we start yelling about for a change to happen now?
You're doing pretty well at yelling in Malta, I have to say. I'm impressed.
Well, you're speaking to the right person.
Yeah, no, so, this thing of the tragedy of Daphne's death, but in galvanizing you, a kind of really active, interested, engaged people who aren't prepared to tolerate, a status quo which you can see is damaging your country. That is such a sort of an amazing engine of change. And so you have the answer to that far more than I do, which is that change is only going to come when people realise and are prepared to do something about it.
We need to change the whole world. Okay.
So, Obama used Facebook in 2008 in a more transparent way to mobilize a grassroots movement and won the election. So probably making use of Facebook in a more appropriate way. So Facebook can be, or any other platform, can be a tool to push forward truth and the right ideas rather than fake news. I see this phenomena linked not just to fake news but to the rise of populism. And probably the Trump effect has been the rise of populism, as has been in other countries like Hungary. So how can one really fight back? This takes me to a book written by Sandel and refers to Michael Young, who's a labor-leaning sociologist writing in 1958, I think, in a book, The Rise of Meritocracy, or rather, Fake Meritocracy, and portrays a scenario way back in 2058, whereby the rise of populism would really hit democracy.
That's not way back, it's way forward.
Yes, it's forward, sorry, to 2020 and 32. And he was actually, we came a few million years earlier with Brexit and Trump's election. So how do you see this combination between the rise of populism, fake news, and using tech platforms to push that idea? And how can truth fight back?
I think there's no doubt about the fact that populism, the rise of populism around the world has gone absolutely hand in hand with the use of these technology platforms in campaigning and in elections. And, You know, it's that this, and I think you, Manuel, you pointed this out. It's because you can these toxic, inflammatory, racist lies, which actually before we had a sort of, there was something which kept us back when that we were doing that out in the open. You know, there was a sort of social contract which stopped that from happening in that way. But it's the same thing as, like, you know, anonymity on the internet. When you're anonymous, you're prepared to say things which you wouldn't when you put your name to it. And I think it's the same thing with politics, is that they're putting out this, you know, inflammatory stuff which is just to appeal to people's emotions. It's not about engaging people on policy. So, you know, for me anyway, the rise of the sort of demagogues has been facilitated by the social media platforms. And what the way back is from that, unfortunately, is above my pay grade.
A lot should be, and yet you described yourself most of the time working at your kitchen bench, alone. You alone stood up to some of the most powerful forces in this world. Some we know by name, and some dark and hidden, who have resources way out of your league and out of your means. They threatened you, they isolated you, they sought to crush you. And when I asked you, but why didn't you give it up? Your only answer was, because it's the truth. We asked you to join us here on the 5th anniversary of the killing of Daphne Caruana Galizia, and we got to know you in your vulnerability, and because of that, that vulnerability, in your courage. We are very happy you are among us, but we want to tell you, your work and the work that you do, the courage that you show, and your willingness to do it when everyone else wants to stop you, makes you our hero. Thank you.
It's very kind. Thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you. Very touching. I feel a bit overwhelmed now. I'm going to start getting overwhelmed and I'll start blubbing again.
Well, thank you for being with us again tonight. Tomorrow you'll be with us as well. So tomorrow I'll remind you, the Archbishop is giving Mass in Bidnia at 9:30 a.m. Someone stop me if I say the time's wrong, because I keep sending people to the wrong places and the wrong time. So I don't know why everyone's too polite to tell me that I'm telling people to show up an hour early. At 3 o'clock in the afternoon, I won't get that one wrong, we'll be meeting for Asylum Gathering in Bidnia, and then we'll meet outside Parliament tomorrow at 6:30 p.m. See you there, and thank you for your support.